Uh, Ma'am, shall we begin with your permission?
Yes, please.
Okay, shall I? A pleasant afternoon to all. What else can mark a better beginning than a prayer? Prayer humbles us down and aligns our humility with the divine. Thereupon, let us commence this session with a moment of silent prayer. Every beginning is a subject to an end, and every end a pathway to yet another beginning. On this positive note, as we are nearing the close of this FTP, I, Dr. Smriti, on behalf of my entire team, the Department of English, Krista Jayanti College, Bengaluru, welcome each one of you present here to the day 7 of our FTP entitled Navigating the Future, Innovations and Strategies in Teaching and Research. From having a sneak peek into the contemporary trends in teaching and research to exploring the possibilities and ethics of AI in teaching and learning, or be it tracing of the epistemology of sustainable education, this FTP has already embarked us into a multifaceted, enlightening journey of diverse perspectives in the fields of teaching and research. Carrying that same enthusiasm to yet another session today, I find this my privilege and a matter of great pride to welcome our guest of honor, our resource person for today, Dr. Sangeetha Menon, Dean, National Institute of Advanced Studies, Indian Institute of Science Campus, Bangalore, Karnataka. A hearty welcome to you, ma'am. I would like to extend my warmest welcome to the founding pillar of Institute and our department, respected Father Joshi, Head, Department of English, for his impeccable leadership and counseling. We welcome you, Father. I am extremely delighted to honor the esteemed presence of Dr. Gopakumar A.V., Dean, Humanities, for his constant assistance and guidance in facilitating the smooth conduction of this FTP. Welcome, sir. This is my pleasure indeed to welcome the presence of our respected PG and UG coordinators, Dr. Loyola Thomas and Professor Jared Jose, for their consistent efforts towards the growth and betterment of the department. Welcome, dear professors. And never the least, I wholeheartedly welcome our entire FDP team. I extend my warm welcome to all my co-workers, colleagues, faculty members, faculty in charges, and all our dear participants. Welcome, all of you. I would now like to take the privilege of introducing our esteemed guest of honor for today, our resource person and speaker, Dr. Sangeetha Menon. Dr. Sangeetha Menon is Dean of the School of Humanities at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. In the Indian Institute of Science campus in Bangalore, India, at NIAS, she is professor, head of the Conscious Studies program. Dr. Menon has been working in the area of consciousness studies for over 20 years. Her educational degrees and training are in biology, philosophy, and psychology. She has given numerous lectures and presentations in her country and also in the United States, UK, Europe, and Australia on wide ranging issues relating to consciousness. She is one of the developers of the field of Indian psychology, guiding research in the area of well being studies, life sustaining values, self transformation, and artistic experience. One of her primary contributions in consciousness studies is in with presenting and engaging with the concept and experience of self from the neurological and uh, philosophical point of view, and theorizing a self challenged brain and brain challenged self. She has been responsible for organizing many interdisciplinary national and international meetings on consciousness and to bring leading members from scientific community and philosophical world for constructive dialogues. She also organizes leadership programs for leaders and decision makers from the public and private sector companies. Her latest publication from Springer focuses on AI and humans. Thank you. Now we will proceed with the session. But before we do proceed, I would like to make some important announcements for today. The questions following the session will be subjective type. Therefore, I request all the participants to kindly pay due attention throughout the session. in order to answer the questions, which will be sent through the feedback link that will be provided at the end of the session. And also for your convenience, the link has been kept open and will be kept open for a longer duration so that you can given your insightful answers and analyze your answers, reflect upon it before you send it to them. Thank you for your understanding. I now request Dr. Menon to kindly take over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Just 1 second, I'll just change my view. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, just changed it to gallery view so that I don't have to see myself. So good afternoon and namaste to all of you. Thank you, Dr. Smriti Sonal, for the very kind words of introduction, extensive introduction.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mary Raymer, for inviting me. And, always your invitation is so warm. And it is such a pleasure to always say yes to you when you invite me. And it is at such another occasion today to be part of this FDP program, which has been going on with many other scholars speaking to you. So one request I have is if your bandwidth allows, please show your faces, because my topic itself is going to be about faces and about people. So what I see are names, which are absolutely beautiful names, but I would like to see the people also behind it. Because, my request is to spare about 40, 45 minutes or to about 60 minutes to be with me, and let us be together here, because we are all very, very busy people. I know that, because being busy is what characterizing today's contemporary life. But if for 1 hour we can, be a little more patient and keep our busy schedules a little bit away so that you can be with this 1 hour with me, And so I request, because around 145 people are there, and I hardly see about 15 people's faces. How can that be? So I request you to show your faces so that I can start. Otherwise, we will have to wait. Okay. So it's important that we see each other, because I don't want to see just the names and thinking that you must be doing something else. Because, one of the greatest attribute of the humankind today is the privilege to be distracted and to do anything you want while something else is going on. So our ability to completely ignore what's going on and to engage with oneself in whatever we want to do is something which is very pervasive today. And that is also a situation which I would like to address as I'm going to speak to you. So you must be knowing the topic of today's discussion, and that is where I want to also hold your attention and my attention as well, because it's all about AI, and we are using Zoom, right? I mean, which is absolutely fantastic interface for us to meet in irrespective of the geographical spaces. So you're all sitting in different places, and yet we are all together here, sharing a beautiful afternoon, and in the comfort of our own homes or our institution, wherever we are. So once again, very nice to see all of you, and thank you for those of you who agreed that we should see each other, and not that you see me and that I don't get to see you. So the question which I want to begin with is, what is the difference between AI and you, or AI and us, the individual? Is there a difference? Because today, well, while we are discussing, we know that the advancements in AI is so much that our day-to-day activities, many of which can be easily taken up by the AI tools and applications and other interfaces that are coming. And some of us are aware of it. Some of us may not be aware, and perhaps we choose also not to be aware. But I feel it's better to be aware of it, though we may not be part of it intentionally, because at some point we are going to be taken to the AI space, irrespective of our permission or our interest. So, so to begin with, it's important to know what is the difference between AI and as a person. And why do we compare this as if there are two entities, two individual entities? Why? Because many of the applications that we use today and many of the interfaces that we use today create content, to learn, or to even communicate like this has a person-like quality about it. And you know that one of the most important interfaces today that has been overwhelmingly showing its presence to us is the chat GPT. And I don't know how many of you won't be using ChatGPT because it's so tempting for not only for students, but for teachers as well. Because usually we blame students, or, they're all using ChatGPT. But it's interesting that teachers and anyone who is curious will be using ChatGPT because that's how it is framed and designed. So it's not something bad or negative to use ChatGPT. It's actually a very good thing to use ChatGPT. But then that's a subject which I'll discuss a little later. But at this point, one of the first questions which I want to raise, and I hope you will be asking this question in your mind as well, that what is the difference between oneself as a human species or as individual person sitting here and AI? So one of the difference is that we can talk for ourselves. We can make our own intentions. We can express our own desires, and we can also choose between choices. And out of all this, we also get to qualified as someone who is strong, someone who is fragile, or someone who is smart, someone who is not smart, etc., etc. So we go back to still the median theories, the social sciences theories that our self is something which is formed out of social interactions. It is our social interactions that create the self, which is you and me. And so that is why, time and again, people encourage that it is important to interact with another person. And that another person could be your family, your institution, and all of this. But social interaction seems to be crucial in developing a lot of our capabilities as a human being, not just the intellectual capabilities, but as a rounded person, as a person together. And this is where the major difference between AI and the human individual comes. That humans, as we all individuals, we are, in a sense, personalities, many qualities which are put together, many traits which are put together. And we create our own narratives every now and then. And these narratives define ourselves, oneself for oneself, and also these narratives define oneself for others as well. So there is a construction of narratives as we live our life. And this is yet another very, very interesting quality or capability that we all do, storytelling. It's not that we tell stories from the books. We also are a story, not just storytellers. And that is something very interesting to look at. We are a story for others, and we are a story for oneself also. And that is why it's interesting when we reflect upon oneself that it's almost sounds like a humorous situation. Oh, Am I this? Or have I done like this? Or have I said this? Because in our storytelling, there is always an enthusiasm, and sometimes there is exaggerations, there are overwhelmingness. For example, when you're sad or you're a little bit down your mood, our storytelling is that we are extremely sad. But perhaps we are not extremely sad. It's just that, maybe the weather is not good or you have a throatache. But then our human mind is capable of extending even a small little disposition to almost a clinical diagnosis. That is why people said, don't look into internet to check your dispositions. Decide for yourself, because we may get into wrong stories. Why am I saying all this? Is to just give a brief about what is called as the human mind. That our mind primarily is a storyteller. And in that story, and a storyteller and a story itself. So, as a storyteller, we weave many qualities, many dispositions to form a continuous narrative. And as a story, we also sometimes present ourselves very differently to different people. That people get curious to meet you, people are put off to meet you, or you yourself dissuade people from you, or you have people come to you. So there are different ways of uh, the story presentation which we do. And that is why the whole idea of communication is very important, to understand this relation between the story per se and the storyteller as well. And we are both. And now to the question again, to bring it back, what is the difference between we as the individual and the AI entity, for example, ChatGPT, or any other entity which even takes a first person noun like I? So, for example, if you ask questions to ChatGPT, many a times you would see that the responses also bring in an I. So, whenever an I comes, remember our social science theory is that we are very, very keen to interact. Our innate ability is to interact with the other person in front of us. So, when you are an I, and another I talks to you, what happens? You're naturally interested to interact with that I, right? And many I's. But in this case, let's say, for example, ChatGPT, when the ChatGPT respond to you in the form of an I, you definitely are more curious, and you also attribute a lot of human human thoughts to that I, human qualities to that I. But what is to be remembered is that while we are the story and the storyteller as the individual, the ChatGPT story is not told by the ChatGPT. It is told by ourselves. We make the story for ChatGPT. And that is why, at times, for example, the ChatGPT makes disclaimers like that. I can make mistakes. Don't trust me 100%. What I can be saying is completely bogus. So all these kind of disclaimers also come. But then it's very easy to start a relationship with ChatGPT, for example. And it's also very easy to start a relationship with, for example, what is called as VBOT, one of the very well-known or widely used bots for counseling and clinical psychological diagnosis. So many are like this. Let's even talk about the Alexa, Google Assistant, and so on, with whom we have personal relationships. Because we all like to have a company. We all like to have someone with us. So even if the Alexa looks like a little large Wi-Fi speaker, we form a relationship with it because someone is listening to you. Someone is responding to what you say. So we are primarily, as human individuals, responding, interacting entities. And this is something which we have to keep in mind. And this is, I would think, the first uh, scenario which we have to keep in mind, that we interact, we respond, And we look for interaction, we look forward to interaction. And in all this, we create our stories, we present ourselves as stories. So, considering this major distinction between AI and the human individual in terms of interaction, the next question I want to ask is, in this context, how do we ensure our well being? And why am I getting into such a very straightforward question? Is because there's a lot of anxiety that AI has caused quite a bit of ill being, quite a bit of challenges. And these challenges range from ethical challenges to alienation to absolute narcissistic personalities. So it's extremely important that we talk about well being. And mind you, our relationship with AI, the different forms of AI, has advanced so much that we don't even realize that the AI is an entity and not an human individual. And at times, the identification is so much that you don't realize that the content which you are producing with the help of ChatGPT or other entities is not yours, is something which is organized and presented to you by ChatGPT. But that's okay, and that's not wrong. But what is important is that not to mix up your identity with the AI self, if at all AI is a self. So it is extremely important to also discuss, how do we decide the well-being for us? There's another question of the well-being of AI, which I will not discuss in this session because that's a completely different topic. So we restrict ourselves to the well-being of we human individuals. So how do we talk about it? How do we discuss about it? How do we ensure the well-being of we individuals who are using AI to greater and greater degrees in the coming days, perhaps in the next to 20 years, we won't even know the advancements in AI and our use of it. And another question which I wanted to ask, some of these questions I think already shared, maybe that you already have it, so I'm just reminding myself what those questions are. So as I said in the beginning, that we all interact, we all respond, and we also use AI. So in this context, it's important to ask another question, that am I a doer? How do we define our actions? Am I a doer, or am I a thinker, or am I both? I hope you're all with me and, perhaps relating to what I'm saying. Why do we ask this question? Are you a doer or a thinker? Because if most of the people who use ChatGPT without a particular reflection are doers, because they are just doing things. They don't think about what they are doing. They're just doing. So, for example, ask ChatGPT to produce a content, and then you copy paste it, etc., etc. And just using ChatGPT because that's one of the most common tools which people are using. But there could be many, many other AI interfaces and applications similar to ChatGPT. So it's important again, therefore, we define ourselves as a doer or a thinker. If you are a thinker, we may be doing, but then we will also be able to think what we are doing. So we have to consider ourselves not just as doers and busy bees. You know what is the busy bee? A bee is always humming, right? It's continuously busy. That's why it's called as a busy bee. So we have to also think whether we can distract ourselves from being busy so much and also think about what we are doing, not just doing. And this is something extremely important. That is where we bring in the idea of reflection, which again I will talk about. But this is some of the premises which I want to bring it to you to consider the difference between just being a doer, a mindless doer, to a mindful thinker. Because a mindful thinker is not that he or she or they would be just thinking blank. No, A person, a mindful thinker, will be doing with the element of reflection in it, with the element of perhaps reviewing what you are doing. Therefore, it's very important. Now, the fourth question is, as I said in the beginning and the very first, what is it to be a human being? And I think most of which, what I said in the beginning as the introduction to the first question, the difference between you and AI covers that. What is it to be a human individual? And we have our own responses to that. What do we mean by you? And if I ask perhaps you may have very interesting responses to that. What is it to be you? What is it to be, let's say, Miss Jiva, who is not showing the video, for example, or let's say Dr. Aishwarya, who is smiling with the, responding to what I just said. So these are very, very interesting scenarios. So what is it to be me is a very important question. And we make our own choices to be what I am. And those choices have to be respected. But is the choice being mindful? Is that choice recognizing who is around us? Is that choice recognizing the environment around us? That's very important. Otherwise, we are living in echo chambers, which I hope you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of discussion on polarization and echo chambers that are being created by AI today. So, what is it to be me is a question which we all have to ask oneself and define for ourselves. And the last question, I will come back later as to what are the life skills which we have to develop. And that's something which we have to jointly decide. So for now, I would perhaps differentiate the rest of what I'm going to speak into three different categories. One is about learning as teachers and as students. And the other is about interdisciplinary and wholesome perspectives, interdisciplinarity and wholesome perspectives. How do we develop perspectives that are interdisciplinary and that are wholesome? And the third is, what do we understand by teachers taking leadership? That's something very important. And these are the three categories which I want to put in the rest of the discussion. And so under learning, I would like to bring in 4 or 5 points, and I will see the time, and accordingly I will move in. And so when we talk about learning, most of you must be thinking, oh, we are talking about learning by students. It's not about for me, learning by students. No, we are talking about co-learning. Learning never happens for one of the binary, which is the student. Learning has to accommodate both the teacher and the student. The learning has a process which includes the teacher as well as the student. So you cannot teach a student. You can only learn along with the student. And such a perspective gives importance for the individuals involved in that process, which is teaching or learning. So this is something, again, we have to keep in mind, that learning per se is a co-activity. It's not a secluded, individual, solipsistic activity. And we see a lot of difficulties of learning being considered as a solipsistic activity, or just learning by rote, just by hearting, or just by remembering text and passages without even understanding what's going on. So we have to, first of all, keep learning as a co-activity, and that is extremely important. Now, under learning, as I told you, I want to look at these three categories: learning, and then interdisciplinary perspectives, and interdisciplinary and holistic perspectives, and a third, what do we mean by leadership by teachers? So first, under learning, let me try to bring in a couple of ideas under that. So the first is critical thinking. When we teach, or when we learn, when we listen to someone, or when we are sharing our own ideas in a classroom or wherever, the first thing which has to emerge is critical thinking. And today, many people complain that there is no critical thinking. In fact, the whole scientific moment, the renaissance of scientific revolution, was founded on this very important activity of critical thinking. And if you look at, the whole tradition of scientific revolution, starting from Francis Bacon and many others, critical thinking was what facilitated scientific thinking. And of course, it facilitated many other kinds of thinking in literature and social sciences. But I'm just pinpointing scientific thinking here because there was a phase where people thought there was no critical thinking. And today, because of the I would say, the overwhelming presence of social media, overwhelming presence of information, overwhelming presence of influencers, the YouTube influencers and other Instagram influencers, it's very easy to be believing something without reflecting upon what you are thinking. By the way, I see somebody called Dr. Sangeetha Menon, and that person definitely doesn't look like me, or at least I may not, I should not be, but that's okay. I just noticed why, since she was talking to someone else, I see Dr. Sangeetha Menon there. Maybe her name is Dr. Sangeetha Menon. So nice to see you. So that was just to make you come back to what we are speaking, because any point of distraction, people suddenly get their attention, right? Oh, you see what's happening, and oh, what's happening? so until learning, critical thinking is very, very important. So critical thinking is, what is critical thinking? Critical thinking is the ability to not to fall for conformities very fast. So if someone says this is the truth, or this is what it is, this is the fact, you should be able to have your own tools and mechanisms to recheck what is said as factual. So rechecking, checking, reviewing, developing tools for what is being presented as the fact or what it is very, very important. And each person can develop their own tools. So critical thinking is actually a set of tools. It is not just one tool. It can be a set of tools. So, for example, even if you make it in a very base level of critical thinking, one way of critical thinking is to discuss about what we have heard or what we perhaps have read with another person over a cup of coffee. That's okay. So it's important that you share our ideas with another person in an open-ended fashion so that you know what the views of the other person is. So that's where critical thinking starts. By the way, critical thinking is not being very negative and saying, oh, all of what you said is wrong and you are not saying what is to be said. No, 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 no. It's not at all name calling. It is not at all putting the other person down. Critical thinking is giving a space for something else also to exist apart from what you present. So that you don't take the entire 100% space. You give a little space. You keep a little space left for something else also to be there. So the base of the critical thinking is that you share what you hear and what you learn with another person, and that discussion and conversation has to happen. So one of the culprit of contemporary socialization is the absence of conversations. Because, of course, we have Zoom, so we don't have to converse. It's all Zoom meetings. But the good old ways of conversation, which is over a cup of coffee, in the tea shop, that has a long way to go. For example, in many states, but at least I have seen in Kerala, but I'm sure in many South Indian states you would see that tea shops are not for just drinking tea, having a cup of tea and coffee, though they are called as tea shops. Tea shops are for people to come and read newspapers and critique on the various things, going on in the state. So there are heated debates. But then the heated debates get cooled down by a hot cup of coffee and tea which is served. So it is a heated debate as well as a hot cup of coffee. So this keeps the civility and the respect which is given for both individuals. At the same time, you're able to debate. So presenting spaces for conversation is very, very important for critical thinking, because otherwise, what are you doing as critical thinking? And therefore, providing a supporting learning environment is extremely important for institutions, which includes educational institutions as well as our own homes. That for our children, there is space created for supporting their own way of learning, and they're in their own pace of learning. It's not only just the space for learning, but also the pace for learning. So some students may not be very fast in taking ideas or interpreting it. So we have to create a pace for that. So as teachers, it's extremely important that we don't ask the students to walk with us, but we have to walk with them. And that's the only way we can jointly walk and the co-learning happens. Most of the time we drag students to come to us or to walk with us. No. We have to see the joy in walking with the students and enabling conversations. So this is some of the very interesting presuppositions for critical thinking. And another is to understand that learning is lifelong learning. So until learning, I told you I'm bringing in these three categories. I'm once in a while I'm summarizing what I'm doing so that in case someone got lost, you can be back. So I'm looking at three scenarios of learning, interdisciplinary perspectives, and leadership for teachers. So until learning, we discuss critical thinking to some extent. There could be much more which can be discussed, but I only raised some of the elements of critical thinking. The other is lifelong learning. What is learning? Most of us think that learning is finished once you get your degree, whichever degree that is, maybe an undergrad degree or a higher degree or a PhD degree or whatever. So once you get your degree, your learning is over. Yeah, my chapter is closed. Now I don't have to learn. Wow, what a relief. God, what a wrong perspective we have. You know why we think like that? Because we always thought that learning is such a boring, burdensome activity. And our institutions have made learning a very boring, very burdensome activity. There's so much weight and struggle in learning. But if we can look at the scenario which I shared with you earlier, then learning becomes a very joyful activity, not a burdensome activity. And from that point of view, learning becomes lifelong learning. And this is again, these days, coming to highlight in the context of AI that learning has to be lifelong. It's not that you finish your learning and close the book and now you start teaching. So when does teaching start? Teaching starts when I stop learning. No, absolutely wrong. Teaching starts when you know that you are still a student and every day is a day for learning for you. That is how joy comes. Otherwise, learning is a very cumbersome, difficult activity. And let's not make learning that way. And another two more important ideas which I want to bring in into learning is experiential learning. So there is also this discussion in national level, state level, that how do you bring in skills into classrooms? Not only just the life skills, which we'll talk about later, but also like vocational learning, that after learning or after getting a degree, you're equipped to do something and become entrepreneurs. The whole idea behind entrepreneurial thinking is that you are able to do something out of your own initiative. So the whole process of education is committed to provide that kind of learning to our students and scholars, that you are able to do something with our hands, with our minds, etc. So that is why experiential learning becomes very important. So we have to bring in more examples. We have to bring in real life scenarios. We have to in life stories, we have to bring in documentaries, we have to introduce very interesting people, and we also have to look at people who have been living and learning in spite of very difficult situations and challenges. So when such a learning happens, which is experiential learning, there will also be more importance for social responsibility. That's again very, very important aspect of learning. That social responsibility becomes an integral part of learning, which again is something which we discussed today, that how are you responsible as teachers, as students, as scholars? And now I want to go to interdisciplinary thinking or wholesome perspectives. So here, I know that many of us in our education focus on one discipline on the other, and then we build up on that. And there is some good thing about it, that is, we become grounded in our own thinking. But then the bad thing about it is that we are good in one subject, but we are not good in holistic or a larger developing larger perspectives. So this is again very difficult when it comes to students and teachers, that you really don't know how to analyze a scenario or how to review a scenario, because you are only trained in one discipline. You don't know what are the other disciplinary ways of looking at things. For example, an engineer is just an engineer. They don't look at it from a social context. So, and vice versa. So it's very important that we develop the interest for thinking from a larger perspective, from the point of different disciplines. It can be economics, literature, physics, biology, or whatever. But then you have to get that interest in our life as teachers and students, that we have more rounded, more organic thinking by bringing in more interdisciplinary engagement with the questions and problems in our society. And the other is, under interdisciplinary thinking, I would say, to bring in some of these human values. I mean, I'm not trying to bring in a patronizing statement by saying values, but then still, I think it's important that we give importance to being kind, being compassionate, being able to listen to another person without judging, and also being compassionate to oneself. And that's again very important. How do we become compassionate to oneself? Which is the only way we can be compassionate to another person. Being compassionate to oneself is not to judge oneself. If we have a failure, we do not define ourselves based on that particular failure, but we define ourselves based on the possibility which is in the future. So some of these dispositions, what we could term as human values, or these larger capabilities such as empathy, compassion, ability to listen, ability to hold our judgments and still be very straightforward in critically examining the scenarios, are very, very important. So interdisciplinary thinking, therefore, is not only just bringing in two disciplines, but it's also bringing in some of these human dispositions. And as I said in the beginning, it's very important that we are mindful of echo chambers and polarization, that we don't try to perpetuate one particular belief or one particular idea, because that definitely is going to fail. Because the interesting thing about the universe or the world which we live is, there can be different vantage point from which we can look at entities and peoples and environment. So develop multiple viewpoints and don't get polarized, because this is again one reason for alienation, that you polarize your own very simplistic views, and you make a big narrative out of it. So it's important that we have multiple viewpoints, that we don't build a world with just one word, but we inhabit that world with a large vocabulary for a varied disposition of emotions, people, and so on. And so this is extremely, again, important under interdisciplinary thinking. And we also have to be mindful of what is today called as privacy and data security when it comes to AI. Because plagiarism or copying material from here, there, everywhere is very rampant today. So, how do we make sure that an author is respected, an author is acknowledged, disclaimers are made? That's again very important. And in the process, that an author's creation is also acknowledged. And that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is what we share through social media. What happens to those content? Is anyone forming narratives for marketing techniques using those content which we freely provide through social media? These questions are again important. Now, coming to the last point, because I have only a few more minutes, is how do we teachers, take that onus of developing leadership? Are we leaders? Leader is not just using power equations or the power positions which we have. Leadership is the ability to walk along with the people whom we think are behind us and therefore walk parallelly. As I said earlier, it is that co-walking is very important. And there are certain capabilities which we have to develop for that. And one is compassionate leadership, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, that we have to demonstrate by practice and not just by preaching. And it's also important that we also consider the parameters of fairness and integrity in our dealing with students and other stakeholders in our institution. And adapting the students and oneself to new environment is also very, very important. So leadership is not something which you can learn from textbook. It's something which you practice. And the best leaders are the best followers, because leaders don't walk just miles away and have the people who are coming behind you looking for you. Who am I following? Nobody knows whom you are following, because the one whom you are following is miles and miles ahead. That person is not a leader. The leader has to walk along with the followers, and this is extremely important. And that is how we develop what is called as compassion, the ability to enjoy the walk. If you just run and, oh, I have claimed the first position, it's not a marathon race to compete, but it is a co-walking and co-learning. There's no competition here, but there's only collaboration and cohabitation. That is why leadership has to be defined by co-walking, not competition. This is something which we have to keep in mind. And final element, I mean, there are many others, but because of the time, is self-reflection, which I think I said a little bit in the beginning. But leaders have to be also reflectors. They reflect upon oneself, they reflect upon the scenario, and they encourage people around them to also reflect. So it is like a reflecting collective as a whole. Imagine if everybody is reflecting, the light of that reflection, which will be much larger, there will be more light for us to walk together. I mean, I'm using just the metaphor of reflector on the roadway. These reflectors, when there are many cars, the car light and the reflector collaborate to have more light shed on the road. So everybody is able to drive very nicely because there is enough light on the road. So if we are able to reflect with our minds, there'll be more light for us to move together, to do things together in our life. So as teachers, it's very important that we encourage the practice of reflection. How do we not only do, but how do we also think about what we are doing? So reflecting is the ability to always objectively look at what we are doing, what we have done, and what we are planning to do in the future. That is one way of defining reflection. Reflection is also the ability to be silent in the midst of a lot of cacophony happening to us. So that ability to embrace the moment of silence in the midst of a lot of noise is also a very important aspect of reflection. And effective leadership from teachers can happen only if we embrace the silence, because as teachers, we are surrounded by words and voice all the time because we teach. We use our words and our vocal organ to share our knowledge with others. So in that process, maintaining silence, how do we maintain silence? Because in the moment of silence, it is possible to see things in a much larger perspective. We are able to hold our emotions to a great extent in the moment of silence. So leaders also have to learn to practice silence, not just talking. So we are all talkers. The speaker herself is talking for a long time now, and but I think but then that is with the recognition of the importance of silence. And effective leadership involves both silence as well as the ability to share knowledge in a compassionate manner. So learning, interdisciplinary thinking, and developing leadership, these three are the three pillars which we have to keep in mind when we are navigating the future AI spaces, which can be very, very competing with us, particularly in providing pedagogic tools and providing very deceptive spaces as well. But then to be mindful of that, be mindful of AI and not to identify AI as similar to a human being, but as something which is artificial, is very important that we develop some of these pillars, such as interdisciplinary thinking, learning as lifelong learning, experiential learning, and developing leadership as not only just teaching and speaking, but also observing silence, and therefore able to see what we are, the situations around us in a very holistic manner. So navigating the AI spaces in the future, today and maybe in the next 10 to 20 years, is something which we have to think about in a very humanistic manner. And humanism involves what I said in the last 45 minutes or so, that it is important that we regain what is it to be a human individual, and we don't equate ourselves with an artificial entity outside there, so that we all can endure, or we all can expand what we can say as our collective well-being. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I have to perhaps see the chat box, I guess, for the question. Yeah.
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Yes.
We are all storytellers, yes, weaving stories within and around us. But are we mindless doers or mindless thinkers? Ma'am, your session has stirred many questions within us and left us with significant questions to look at. Thank you for taking us through a thoughtful, provoking journey on projecting the nuances of how to become a humanistic teacher in order to navigate the future AI spaces. Thank you for sharing your insights on how to exercise our roles as storytellers amidst the distracting voices of AI, on how to focus on our well being, and on the significance and need for engaging into critical and interdisciplinary thinking. I'm sure our participants might have found the session useful and shall depart with huge takeaways from this session. Thank you once again. Now, dear participants, the floor is open for the QA sessions. You can post your questions. We already have one here, ma'am.
Yeah, I know. Actually, some have sent to me directly as well. I can see.
Oh, sure. Then you can
just
go ahead
one
with
of the
those.
question is, as you said, ma'am, learning is burdening because we have been taught this in school and colleges, and I believe learning is something very creative. We can learn even from a person walking on the road how to reverse this process. Uh, Hema Mirchandani, or I can't see your name as it. I hope she's here, Hema. If I, or I don't know whether I'm seeing her name rightly, but I hope you are here. And thank you for that very, very important question. The only way we can respond to that question is by being creative in our own ways. And those ways we have to take charge. And we don't go by the flow of this fast moving trend to consider learning as yet another activity which is burdensome. So to be creative, to be open, that's the only way we can perhaps consider learning as a very enjoyable activity.
Thank you, ma'am.
Another question. Yes, Dr. Aishwarya's question. Thank you for talking about the importance of values in a tech-driven world. Is there an ethical way to engage with AI while fully aware of its ecological cost and, as you mentioned, the nature of the harm that has been done in its creation by plagiarizing the work of countless other writers? Is it still possible to participate ethically in the whole enterprise? Yeah, so definitely. So in AI itself, there's a lot of initiatives to what is called as ethical AI. And that term itself has now become very fashionable, that we engage with ethical AI. So one is acknowledgement, and not by when someone asks you to acknowledge. For with our own interest, with our own mind, we acknowledge. And that acknowledgement can be even be an acknowledgement of ChatGPT. So if you have taken material from ChatGPT, we can acknowledge that, okay, this was to some extent with the help of ChatGPT. And the way you get content from ChatGPT is not just one-sided. Means you also have to interact. So it's always a collaborative activity between you and ChatGPT. So to embrace ethical AI is the challenge of big corporations today, and also as users and customers. We are, and particularly also in education institutions. Another question, thank you. Okay, I think that is the same. What is the difference between interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary approach? Various Anil Kumar. Well, interdisciplinary is at least using one or two disciplines and seeing the same question extended within the context of more than one discipline. Multidisciplinary, it can be interdisciplinary, but multidisciplinary is involving as many disciplines as involved, and also getting a response to a particular question from the point of view of different disciplines. So in a sense, most of the multidisciplinary works are also interdisciplinary, but interdisciplinary by itself need not be multidisciplinary because of the limitations of disciplines within interdisciplinary itself. In a rapidly revolving educational landscape, how can a humanistic teacher maintain a focus on the whole person rather than just the academic outcomes? Dr. Kaushik Bhuyan. Extremely important question. And let me tell you, nobody is going to help you in this. That people all want you to be running the marathon race. So the only way is, as you are running this marathon race, find your own stops, your own best stops, where you will wait for some time, take a cup of coffee, take a break. What I mean is, you yourself have to create breaks for you. And that break could be just 10 minutes, maybe every 2 hours or every 1 hour. And that wouldn't cost you much. That 10-minute break can be just be with yourself, just be with what's going on around you. So this ability to take break is extremely important to realize that we are all humans, we are all individuals. And as a teacher, I think it's important again to take these breaks, not only take these breaks, give these breaks, because your students are waiting for you to give a break. Right? So it's important that we are compassionate, particularly while teaching and taking classes. And that 10-minute break, let people do whatever they want. But actually, when you give these breaks, people won't do it. People will take those breaks even for interaction or just for doing something else. But those breaks are extremely important. I think those are the questions which I see now in the chat boxes. I hope I have not missed anything.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. Now, due to time constraints, we'll not be able to take any further questions, but however, the participants can all come up with their questions in the feedback form that is provided, and that will be directed
Somebody
directly.
ask a question so that I can hear some alternate voices. It at least
If there's somebody in the, yeah, the participants may ask
yeah,
the question
they
directly.
should be free to ask the questions they want to. If I don't know, they can raise your hand.
People can raise their hands if
Raise your
yes,
hands.
if somebody,
Phones. There are
any
these
participant who
phones,
want
so
to.
you can go and raise your hand. I don't know whether people know how to do that because I don't know. See, under React, perhaps, I don't know. Maybe that would be recognized. Yeah, hand gestures. Under React, you would see the icon to raise your hand in case you have a question. I'm not saying you should raise your hand in case you want
Yeah,
to say
participants, if you have any questions, you all can raise your hands and we
questions
can,
or comments
ha-
or something which you would like to say.
or any comments. If somebody's up with any comments, can please volunteer
The idea
yourselves
is
here.
don't allow one person to speak for long. That is the idea. So you need
Sure.
to have your own voice heard. All right, it looks like silence is golden for the evening. I don't see any hands, or maybe they don't know how to raise their hands. It's actually under React button in case you want to raise your question, but I don't see it. So I guess Dr. Smriti, Dr. Santosh
Sure.
Kumar. I don't know where, yeah, I don't see him though, but I see the hand, yeah. Yes, Dr. Santosh Kumar. Yes,
Hi, good evening, Professor.
evening.
Though I don't have any question, but since you were insisting somebody should speak, so I thought I should break the silence and not let this silence be golden, but silver. Okay, it was a wonderful session. Really thoughtful and thought-provoking and very informative. Thank you for your suggestion.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, and I equally cherished this last 1 hour.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we'll proceed with the vote of thanks. Endings are always tough, but I believe when something ends, there are new beginnings, new opportunities, and new things to be excited for, too. This is a quote by Mike Fisher. On this note, I would like to call upon Dr. Nisita, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks for today's session. Ma'am, over to you.
Is someone missing? Or I hope you didn't ask me, right?
Yeah, no, ma'am. She's just there. Something. She'll just be right.
Okay, while the person is looking for vote of thanks, a couple of things which you can do is at least write keywords. That's one interesting practice which we as teachers and students can do. If you attend a lecture, for example, write the keywords. At least have 5 keywords which you might have received or which you must have come in your mind while you were part of that activity. The keywords means they're not long sentences, just at least maybe maximum of 2 words, a conjugate of 2 words, and reflect on those keywords. So this habit of making keywords is very, very important. And they will give us a summary of in a condensed manner of otherwise very expansive literature and learning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah,
The
ma'am.
person is back. So yeah, you can begin,
Yes.
ma'am.
Due to some technical glitch, I couldn't take over immediately. Sorry for that. I apologize. A thankful heart is not only the greatest virtue, but the parent of all other virtues, said Cicero. I feel privileged to propose vote of thanks on behalf of the organizing committee. First and foremost, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to Professor Sangeetha Menon, Dean, National Institute of Advanced Studies, Indian Institute of Science Campus, Bangalore, for delivering the session, being a humanistic teacher to navigate the future AI space. It was truly a pleasure to have you here, ma'am. Thank you for the enlightening session. We are deeply grateful for your time and your significant contribution to this international FDP in spite of your busy schedule. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
I would
Nishit.
Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank our management for their continuous support and encouragement in organizing such an academic initiative. A special note of thanks goes to our HOD of English Department, Dr. Father Joshi Matthew, whose leadership and guidance have been vital in ensuring the smooth coordination of this program. Thank you, Father. A note of appreciation and thanks to the department coordinators and faculties for the constant support and feedback on this international FDP. Sincere thanks to my fellow coordinators of this international FDP and the tech team who ensured the seamless execution of today's session. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all of the participants for your enthusiasm and participation. Thank you all once again. Have a great evening. I remain.
Thank
all
you,
very
Dr. Nishita.
much. Thank you, Professor
Thank you,
Menon,
ma'am.
and thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Smriti
ma'am.
Sonal, and thank
Thank
you
you
all
so
for
much, ma'am.
your patience for being with me. Have a nice
Thank
evening.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, Shoma. Bye, ma'am. Now, may I now request all the participants to kindly turn on their cameras for a group picture?
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you all once again, and we thank our resource person for her valuable time and humble presence here. And before we end the session, I would like to announce a few general instructions and also make sure that you check the feedback link, which has been shared in your chat box. A short note on tomorrow's session, dear participants. Tomorrow will be the last day of the FTP, and Dr. Nidhi Nikar will be the resource person for tomorrow, who will be speaking on the topic Indic storytelling traditions and overview. We are looking forward to your enthusiastic participation tomorrow, and kindly make sure you attend the session as a further updates on your certification and other details will be provided. Another important thing is that tomorrow we will begin at 12 p.m. So make sure that you log in early by 11:50 a.m. And the session is now ended and the feedback form is available. We would like to give you a glimpse on the upcoming events. So we are delighted to have you with us in this virtual journey. But as the FTP is nearing to an end, we would like to give you a glimpse of our upcoming programs and events to be held at Christo Jayanti campus and would love to have your participation again in those programs as well. We cordially invite you for all our upcoming events. Here's a short overview of the upcoming programs. We have three significant upcoming events as of now. Our upcoming national seminar entitled Reviving the Indian Knowledge System, Integrating Ancient Wisdom with Contemporary Practices on 10th of October 2024, a national conference entitled Neo-Colonialism, Representing Narratives, Realities and Responses on the 8th and 9th of November 2024, followed by an international conference on India's maritime history and identity at culture. So thank you, everyone. Make sure you block your calendars for the same. And a reminder, tomorrow, make sure that you log in 10 minutes prior to the session, 11:50, we are going to see you. Thank you. Now we are going to close the session.
rise and ease, lights up a life divine, fills knowledge in our minds. Laws and the book make us sublime. With the mighty Lord, we soar high on the bedrock of faith. Integrity of force, human dignity true. Excellence we strive. Christo Jayanti, Christo Jayanti, life and prosperity. Christo Jayanti, Christo and prosperity. Rays of joy and peace sprawl our hearts and minds. On we march our goals as a beacon for the world, with a passion for our growth.